Um, but thanks for being here today. My name is Patrick DePriest. I'm an Energy Policy Analyst with the Oregon Department of Energy. I'm going to help facilitate and moderate today's webinar. The webinar today is an overview of the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program, which is an incentive program focused on heat pump installation in rental dwellings, as well as manufactured homes and recreational vehicles in rented spaces. This webinar is being recorded, and the slides and recording will be posted to Odo's website, which I believe someone will add in the chat. Before we jump into the slides, I want to start with introducing some of the other staff on the webinar who have been working on launching this program. And while I'm doing that, please do take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and share your name and organization or group you're affiliated with, and that will really help us get a sense later after the webinar of the coverage of the state and who attended. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with passing it to introductions to James, who is our main presenter today.
Thanks, Patrick. Yes, James Kogel here, Policy Analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy. I've been working on putting together the administrative rules for the program.
Thanks, James. Kayla, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Keela. I am an incentive analyst for both of the heat pump programs. So I'm usually the one on the other end of any questions you guys have.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla. How about Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Pajevitz, and I am the other incentive analyst for the heat pump programs.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. How about Patricia?
I'm Patricia. I'm here to help with the webinar. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll see what we can do to help you out with the webinar access, and then the team will answer questions later on as they come up or at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And I think the last team member we have today is Doug. If you're on, Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug Bear, Senior Incentives Analyst with the agency, currently working in the Wildfire Incentives Program, which also has heat pump incentives, and assisting with the startup of this particular heat pump incentive program.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. And thanks for everyone who've already put your name and organization in the chat. Please continue to do that. So I think we can move on to the next slide. I wanted to give a quick overview of the Department of Energy in case you aren't familiar with the agency. So Odo's mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. Odo advances solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. So we advance this mission through many initiatives that support energy saving and efficiency, decarbonization efforts, and community resiliency. And the rental home heat pump program that we're talking about today is one of the newest of those initiatives that targets benefits across the state. I'm just going to share a few words here on using WebEx in case you're not familiar with this platform. You can use the raise hand function to ask a question, and you're also welcome to type questions into the chat. We do encourage questions and really appreciate your participation. We won't provide answers in the chat, but instead we'll try to answer them aloud. And where appropriate and timely to the topic being discussed, I will pose questions to James and others during the presentation. Other questions will be saved for discussion after the presentation. And any program-specific questions that we don't get to during this hour will be included in a Q&A document that we'll publish to the website. Again, you can use the raise hand function to ask questions. If you're on the phone, which I think there are a few of you, you can use *3 to raise your hand. And when we see that, we'll work to call on you and unmute you for your question. So does anyone have any questions about using WebEx before we kick off the substance? I don't know if we had someone on mute just now. A little noise.
Randy has a question, had his hand up.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Randy. All right. Well, let's go ahead and remute Randy, and then we will call on him again if we need to, or Randy, you can put something in the chat as well. And I think I'll pass it to James to start talking about the objectives of the webinar.
Thanks, Patrick. So the object of today's webinar is to provide an update on the final rules, highlighting some of the changes, as well as to provide an overview of the application and payment processes. We will provide an estimated timeline for the program towards the end of the presentation. As mentioned, we want to encourage questions today, so please raise your hand or drop a question in the chat throughout the presentation, and we can pause at a convenient stopping place to discuss. So following the heat dome event in 2021, Oregon passed Senate Bill 1536 in 2022. This bill had a number of components, one of which was the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. Since then, the Oregon Department of Energy conducted some initial outreach with stakeholders prior to drafting rule language. Draft rules were then published in November last year, and public comment collected on them, with a public hearing having been held in early January. We appreciate all the comments we received during this time and considered them when finalizing the program rules. The final program rules were published in April and are available from the Oregon Secretaries of State's website. Some of the comments received were not necessarily incorporated into the rules, but we will be considering them as we implement the program, for instance, while we are developing guidance and information about the program. So the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program will provide financial assistance through rebates for the purchase and installation of heat pumps in rental homes. It will also provide grants to assist with the cost of related upgrades that facilitate the installation of a heat pump in a rental home. The financial assistance is available to the owners of a dwelling unit used as a residential tenancy. Note, this does not include vacation rentals or transient occupancy in hotels or motels. It is also available to the owners of manufactured dwellings or RVs who rent a space in a manufactured dwelling or RV park. The financial assistance is provided to the contractor, who must pass the full value of the rebate and grant on to the owner of the dwelling where the heat pump will be installed. As mentioned, rebates will be provided for the purchase and installation of a heat pump. The maximum rebate amounts vary by the dwelling type, but also by the efficiency of the heat pump being installed and the income level of the household living in the dwelling. Similarly, the maximum amount available for grants available for cost of related upgrades is dependent on the income level of the household living in the dwelling. The rebates and grants cannot exceed 100% of the cost of the purchase installation or the cost of the upgrade. And the specific efficiency requirements and low moderate income eligibility requirements are all detailed in the administrative rules. If there are specific questions related to these, we would be happy to answer them today, or feel free to call or email the program at a later date. We're always happy to answer questions that you may have. So, as mentioned, the financial assistance is provided to the contractor, who must pass the full value onto the customer. There are requirements a contractor must pass to be eligible to apply for the rebates and grants from the program. These include having a history of compliance with the rules and requirements of several other state agencies. The Oregon Department of Energy will be reviewing past 2 years of compliance when looking at the contractor's application. The department will have an online application that interested contractors can apply through to become an eligible contractor. The department will then review and either approve or deny the contractor application. If approved, the contractor will then be placed on a list of eligible contractors and given access to the application system through which they can submit applications for the rebate and grant reservations.
Hey, James. I had a question that came up that I think pertained to the previous slide.
Okay.
Matt asked, will this include the cost of modifications to the electrical system to bring power to the unit? So maybe he's asking about related upgrades.
Yeah. So there are a little more specifics in the program rules around which upgrades will be available, will be permitted. Just wanting to make sure I get the. So it's to facilitate the installation of the heat pump, and these will include a new electrical panel or other upgrades to the electrical system of the dwelling that the department determines are eligible. So if there are specific examples, I would reach out with those specific examples to the team, and we can kind of assess those, and we'll be building out kind of a more specific list as we go. We obviously wanted to include those electrical system upgrades for the dwelling, but we didn't want to just have a specific list if these kind of come up. So we'll kind of assess those and build that out as these examples are proposed to the department. So I would suggest likely yes in terms of kind of the general language you've used there, Matt, but in terms of more specifics, if there's a specific example, let us know and we can kind of let you know whether it would be eligible.
Thanks, James.
I would also just clarify as well, mechanical upgrades to facilitate the installation are also eligible. So that's another piece. It's not just the electrical upgrades that are available. Sorry to interrupt, Patrick.
Not at all. I was thanking you, and then we have a question also related to this from Jeremy that's asking about tax credits. So when you say the total cost of incentives and rebates cannot exceed 100% of the project cost, does that include tax credit?
So it will. We can only assess what is known at the time. So if those tax credits are known, we'll be asking contractors to kind of just detail the incentives that they are aware of when applying to the program.
Okay, thank you. I think.
And I would just say, sorry, we'll also provide kind of more details and guidance on this as we get closer to the applications launching.
Okay. another question I think we can address now, because I was just checking to make sure we weren't going to cover it later in the presentation, is kind of a clarification on the impact of income levels to the incentive amounts. And this person asks, Lori asks, are you saying my tenant's income determines how much I, being the landlord, get for installing the new heat pump? So I think it's a question about where the benefits of the incentive are going.
Sure. So yes, it is the income level of the tenants that is determines can influence the level of rebate or grant that is a customer is eligible for.
Thanks, James. And then I think there's one I think that we can hold. I have a question that I may need clarification on from Vin that asks, is there a maximum limit of dollars per unit?
So yeah, I can I think I understand that one. I think it's those rebate amounts are maximum per dwelling. So it's per residential tenancy or per manufactured dwelling, there's a maximum rebates amount. Not necessarily per heat pump, it's kind of for the dwelling.
In other words, the heat pump can be a variety of costs. There's no cap on the cost of the heat pump, but there's a cap on the financial assistance.
Yes.
And then one more before I let you move on with your presentation. Chris asks, will ECHO or Odo provide an online portal for property owners to see their qualification status? Which I would assume means like that the property qualifies for a heat pump. And so maybe you can clarify the different income level of the availability.
So we'll be providing additional guidance on the income levels and guidance around that. I'm going to pop a link in the chat that also gives a little more of the specifics of how income level for the tenants is verified, though we will be kind of providing more guidance on that as we get closer to the application. Sometimes it can be a little we'll try and get it in a little more plain English as well in our guidance.
Yes, and I think that Chris just added a helpful clarification perhaps in the chat, which is that there's different rebate amounts based on the income qualification. So in other words, it's available to any rented unit, but it is a higher rebate for a low moderate income qualified.
Yes, that's precisely it. There is a rebate available regardless of the income level of the tenant. Just a higher income level is available for low moderate income tenants. I should say the rebate goes to the customer, which is the owner, not the tenant, but the dwelling that is rented to low moderate income tenants.
Thank you. We have several additional questions, but I think you should just move on, and we will definitely get to these.
Yeah, sure. So we covered the contract application. So once contractors are approved and get added onto that eligible list of contractors, that's the only time they have to go through that process. And then this is kind of the process for applying for those rebates and grants. They happen every time you go and apply for a rebate and grant. So this slide kind of maps that out. And so a contractor must apply to reserve a rebate before installing the heat pump. Similarly, a request for a grant must have been approved before the work to carry out an eligible upgrade has begun. There are a list of project requirements detailed in the rules, and a few general topics are listed on the slides. You see at the bottom there in the note. Contractors may be interested in the additional clarification provided in the rule related to sizing calculations, which will be assessed using Air Conditioning Contractors of America, Manual J and Manual S residential load calculation methodology, though equivalent energy efficient industry standards for sizing equipment may also be accepted by the Oregon Department of Energy. The department will review the rebate and grant application, and if approved, reserve funding. The contractor will install the heat pump and, if applicable, carry out any upgrades. Once the work is complete, the contractor will then come back to the online system and request the funds. The department will review the final documentation, and if approved, the funds will be paid to the contractor. So it's the contractor who is applying, supplying the documentation, and then getting paid at the end, and then it's just the funding, the full value of the rebate and grant is passed on to the customer. So when applying for a grant or rebate or grant, specific information is required to be submitted by the contractor. Some of this information will need to be collected from the customer. One noticeable addition to this list that was added in finalizing the rules is a signed installation agreement. This just needs to be signed by both customer and contractor and list, amongst other items, the address where the installation will occur, the customer name, the cost, the heat pump equipment details, and warranty information. When it comes to requesting the funds, contractors will be required to input and upload some information, including but not limited to kind of the permit information, energy savings from the installation, and a signed statement that the customer received the full value of the rebate and grant. And we will be providing specific instructions on how contractors can calculate the energy savings closer to the application launch. So we have a tentative timeline for launching the program and hope to open applications for contractors to begin applying to the program next month. This will allow the agency to review the contractor applications prior to opening the application system to accept rebate and grant applications. The program expects to be fully established this summer. We will obviously still be continuing to accept contractor applications after that initial opening. It'll just be kind of an ongoing process. So thank you for joining today, and I think we've got a number of questions that we'll kind of continue to answer. And if there's any more, please just kind of put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to continue to answer those as well.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I've been notating the ones from earlier to make sure we get through them all. So I'll start working through those now. The first of which was a question from Tim about the performance period, asking whether the performance period can have a 5, 6, or 7-year period. So I think it's a question about our expected ability to put out the funds, like the timelines and things like that?
Oh, that's a great point. So the bill actually that established the program had a sunset date in. I'm just pulling that up now to make sure that I get the correct date. So the program sunset date at present is January 2nd, 2025. So that is the current period for the program as it is in the bill.
Right. With, of course, the intention for that to be corrected, although it hasn't been, right, to a year later.
Sure, yes, that is
Yes.
correct.
Um,
But still, it's there is a finite time on the there is a bill in so looking at that, but it is only the additional year to 2026 that is being proposed to be changed to.
Great. And there's a few more questions on the income checking. So as James said, there will be additional guidance on how that will come out, on how that can be shown in order to receive the larger rebate. So we did have that question from Ben. How is the income level of tenants verified? Are you able, James, to just point to a few examples of how it could be?
So yeah, there is we have some of that in the rule language, and again, we'll get that guidance put together and published. But kind of an example would be kind of a letter of eligibility for a number of different programs such as SNAP or Medicaid, or the low-income home energy assistance program. This is kind of the residents residing at the dwelling. Alternatively, there's a way the owner could qualify through one of Oregon Housing Community Services rental housing programs, or whether the owner is participating in housing choice voucher program. And then there is also the kind of tax transcripts from the residents at the dwelling, living in the dwelling as well. So there's a number of different pathways, and there were additional ones added in finalizing the rules following comments that we received.
Thanks. So a related question from James was, is there an expectation that the tenant as the qualifying tenant, have a long-term lease or remain in the housing unit after the installation, or that the unit be rented to a similar income qualified tenant?
So we do not have anything in the rules around that. There's nothing in the bill around that piece as well. So it is just we are looking at the information we have at the present, and that is what the program will be assessing.
Great, thank you. And so we have several attendees that have asked about whether if the unit is unoccupied, what the impact of that is. For example, if the unit is between tenants.
Yeah, it's a good question. One that I probably don't have a full answer for today, but we can certainly provide additional details in a follow-up question answer document. But Yeah, there is. If they're participating in one of the programs, for instance, Oregon Housing Community Services, then they may still be able to provide eligibility for those programs, even if they're between tenants at the time. But yes, we can certainly look at that as well. Provide more details.
Great. I see that Sarah had a question about the timeline of the program, which we did cover in the slide. So Sarah, just send another message in the chat if that slide didn't answer that question for you. Next, I do have a question on upgrades. Jeremy asked about duct sealing and installation. Would that be considered to facilitate heat pump installations?
Sorry, could you repeat that again? Sorry, Patrick. Was
the
it
question? Yeah, does it include duct sealing and insulation? Sorry, not installation. Insulation.
Okay. So this program is around mechanical, includes mechanical upgrades, and I would want to kind of just confer with some additional technical staff at the agency, and again, we can kind of provide that clarification, but it does include mechanical upgrades, and we'll definitely kind of follow up with a little more guidance on that after this event.
I have a question from Randy. They say we are in the manufactured home program with central heat pumps and ductless heat pumps. How does this program affect this? And maybe that rings a bell for you, James, but I'm not sure. That needs clarification.
Sorry, Patrick, what was the question?
They said we are in the manufactured home program. So I don't know if that's another program with ETO or someone else, with central heat pumps and ductless heat pumps. How does this program affect this? So if you're more context.
I'm not familiar if there is another program that you're receiving funding from about the installation of heat pumps, then that is the program. You are able to stack incentives, although I cannot speak to the requirements and specifications of other programs. But the only requirement in relation to this is that the costs aren't exceeded when combining incentives.
Thanks, James. I think that's good, and Randy can add more if needed. We have a couple of questions about the types of heat pumps covered, which to my knowledge is pretty broad. So one person asked, does it cover ductless heat pumps? Another person asked, does it cover or apply to air to water heat pumps? Which I think the answer is yes to both of those.
Yes, so there's a list of the heat pump type specifications in the, let's pop that in the chat. So it kind of details the types of heat pumps that are eligible to be covered and the specific efficiency requirements that are related to those heat pumps as well. And there's again 2 efficiency requirements. One is kind of the baseline efficiency that a heat pump must meet to be eligible for a rebate, and then there is a second higher efficiency level that if the heat pump meets or exceeds, then the customer would be eligible for a higher rebate.
Thank you. Sean asks, what is the time frame between the contractor request rebate and approval?
So we don't have a set time scale right now. We'll be able to provide more specifics once the program is up and running. We will obviously be aiming to be as efficient and timely as possible. And when processing the applications.
Jody asks, will you supply a list of approved contractors to customers? The answer to that is yes. We will continuously compile a list as contractors are registered through our registration form. Shane asks, can this program be used in new affordable housing construction? Units are designated as affordable through the city and state, but no current tenant.
That is a great question, and one I think I'll want to kind of think through to make sure we get a full answer for you as well, to get a few extra details in.
Yes, and we'll be sure to have a section in the Q&A, the written Q&A, that kind of gets at some of these income-based questions. Which David also has a question along those lines. In a multi-unit residence, how is the tenant income computed? Total income, average income, etc.
And yeah, that'll be in that low moderate income guidance. So once we publish that, that will I think answer David's questions and clarify that for them.
Okay. Feel free to cut me off if you have other things you want to get into. I'm just kind of continuing to work through the questions.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just kind of clarifying the it's kind of the income level of the residents in the dwelling, and the dwelling is kind of that residency tenancy, that dwelling unit, or the manufactured home, or the RV. But again, we'll provide greater detail in that guidance, which might more clearly answer David's question.
Okay. We've had, right, so there's been a few questions about stacking incentives. So James, let you know that under our program, the stacking incentives, as long as it doesn't extend beyond 100% of the cost of installation, and then it's allowed. I'm not sure. We have a question from Peak Electrical Services. Do these rebates supersede ETO rebates?
So again, I can't speak to ETO's rebates, but and their requirements, but there's nothing in our program that would prevent a customer from stacking ETO rebates. And this program, as long as it doesn't exceed the cost of the purchase and installation of the heat pump or the eligible upgrade.
Thanks, James. To clarify for Lowen, they asked the income limitations are for the landlord or the renter, question mark. And right, so the clarification there is that there isn't a limitation in terms of you won't be able to apply for a rebate if there isn't a certain income met. It's more that there's a different amount of rebate available to low moderate income. Let's see. We have a question on eligibility from Justin. Can only contractors install the units?
So yes, only eligible contractors will be able to apply to the program, and the requirements around kind of subcontractors as well, having to kind of and those are in the rules as well. So the contractor that installs the heat pump, or if there's a subcontractor that installs the heat pump on behalf of a contractor, they must hold any license, bond, insurance, permit required to sell, install the permit. And they've got to be maintained through the installation period until the installation of the heat pump is complete.
Thank you to Sarah to answering Lori's question in the chat, and I just added that web page for this again for this rental home program, and presumably you would find the contractor list under the resources section on that page when it is available. Okay, a question from James is, what is the exact difference between rebate and grant, as you talked about them earlier?
That is just kind of the difference between how they've been termed in terms of what they're being used for. So the rebate can be put towards the purchase and installation of the heat pump, and the grant can be used to pay the costs of eligible upgrade.
There's a few other questions on qualifying income levels. I think that we, at this point, will probably hold those more nuanced questions. We are keeping the chat for this, so we'll be sure to address those in our Q&A document. But I think it would be more helpful for the audience for those to be answered later. Let me check to see if there are others I've missed. Alan asked, I live in one room of a 10-unit rental property that I own. Would this qualify for the program?
So the so if you're the owner occupant of the dwelling, you would not be eligible for purchase and installation of a heat pump in the dwelling that you own and occupy. But if there are dwelling units within the rental property that are rented out, then those units would be eligible to qualify for the program. Well, I say may be eligible to qualify for the program depending on kind of what you're planning on installing and how it's installed and everything.
reading through the chat. Yes, to loan, the presentation will be made available on the website that was just shared in the chat, as well as the slides. Jody asks, is there a financing program that will be available, financing over time with state? I don't fully understand the question. I don't know if you do, James.
There'll not be a kind of associated financing program in terms of kind of loans or anything like that. If that's what the question was getting at least not that is being operated by the Oregon Department of Energy related to heat pumps.
So just a clarification on a question that was raised earlier, if I may.
Yes, please, Doug.
There was a question from Chris about whether there would be an online portal for property owners to see the qualification status. There will be an online portal for application for both, as James mentioned, registration for contractors and also for reserving the incentive. And that will be accessible only to the registered contractors. It will not be accessible by property owners unless they are one of those owners of a manufactured home. So there will not be something that most landlords could see. It would not be something that is available for the tenants to see. And so the portal is our only way of interfacing with the program. So all applications will be submitted through the portal. We're not currently planning on any paper application forms or other methods of applying for the incentive request. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Doug. Jody added a question on top of their financing question that just says with the electric company question mark. Jody, if you are able, we would be able to bring you off of mute to ask your question. I'm just not sure that there's enough information there to know exactly what you're asking. Sean asked about the time frame for the submission application to approval, which James did previously answer, that we don't have a specific time frame on how long it would take to process, but that we would process them at the most efficient pace we could. You did, James, talk about the kind of once approved, the how long it's open for installation, right?
We did not mention that. So once a rebate is reserved, there's 180 days. The reservation is valid for, and then, but that can also be extended for another 180 days at the request of the contractor. And if, for whatever reason, the installation and a rebate request has not been requested after that 360 days, then the reservation just would be cancelled, but the contractor could reapply should they wish to get a rebate for that installation if it was going to happen.
Thanks, James. Jeremy has another question about tenant financial information. Do we have a method for the tenants to directly submit sensitive financial info to Odo without the landlord or contractor seeing it?
We will not have that available at launch. A contractor will have to submit all documentation, and there shouldn't be any kind of social security numbers or anything like that on any of the documentation that is submitted by a contractor. Kind of the tax transcripts should not kind of have that information on there. It's not a kind of a tax record. The transcripts are come out of a summary document, but we do recognize that there is some kind of sensitivity around income documentation, and we will continue to explore what options there are available in the future.
We've still got a few minutes, but in case anyone is dropping off, I wanted to thank you for being here today and encourage you to reach out to our email for the program if you have additional questions. An additional question that just came in is again about the unit being vacant and the screening for prospective tenants for income qualification. So I think that's another one that we'll be sure to answer the follow-up Q&A to get a clear answer for you on that. Julie asks, are portable heat pumps included in this program?
No, they are. I don't believe they are included in this program. We can certainly look to see if there are other programs available and provide see if there's information we would be able to direct to. I know there's been some other programs active, if they're not still active, that relate to things like portable air conditioners or but yeah, we can follow up with that and just kind of refer you back to, for this program, there's the technical requirements around it being kind of a ductless or a ducted or a kind of a ground source heat pump, and those technical specifications that I linked to earlier, and we can have links to on our information we provide.
Just got another question about whether the rebates are available now, to which the answer is no, because the registration for contractors is not yet open.
Yeah, and I just put the tentative timeline for the program up.
Thanks, James. I was just going to ask for that. Perfect. All right, well, that is noon. If we didn't answer a question, like didn't raise a question at all that's in the chat, please be sure to email us about that. There were many, and I think I tried my best to get to all of them. Other questions that we didn't have perfect answers for today, we'll address in our online Q&A, and appreciate everyone being here today.